I want to welcome you to this webinar today, sponsored by the BYU Management Society. I am Rixa Oman, Executive Director of the Management Society, and I'll be your moderator for today's event, and we're so glad you can join us. We're very pleased to have Michelle Linford and Stephanie Probst present a discussion on planning for flexibility. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. The audio portion of the presentation can be heard through the speakers on your computer. For those who call in, please note that you can choose that option on the screen panel to the right of your screen. During the presentation, all of the attendees will be muted. That's so you can hear us, but we can't hear you. This is in order to deliver a clear presentation to everyone who attends. Many of you asked very thoughtful and pertinent questions on the survey when you registered. We've reviewed these very carefully and will respond to a number of them during the presentation. Although we can't address each one individually, they have helped us to direct what we're going to say. And we certainly hope that by hearing our experiences today, you'll find new ways to address your own. Again, welcome. Let me quickly explain the format for today's webinar. I'm going to introduce the theme, and then both Stephanie and Michelle will tell their individual stories of the twists in their own lives, both expected and unexpected. Then they'll each take time to share some of the life lessons that they've learned about being flexible and adaptable, and the importance of preparing for and keeping the door open for as many opportunities as possible. Stephanie will address preparing for a career at any stage. Michelle will talk about principles that are helping me to be more flexible. And finally, we will address some very specific questions that you ask on the registration survey. You know, as we discuss the possible topics for today, we realize that often the only thing certain in a woman's life can be uncertainty. With education, marriages, missions, careers, children, finances, disabilities, divorce, and death, often Plan A becomes Plan B and then Plan Z. Planning for the unknown involves planning for flexibility, and that is how this came about. Elder Richard G. Scott said, "Throughout the ages, many have obtained guidance helpful to resolve challenges in their lives by following the example of respected individuals who resolved similar problems. Today, world conditions change so rapidly that such a course of action isn't always available to us. Personally, I rejoice in that reality because it creates a condition where we, of necessity, are more dependent upon the Spirit to guide us through life. Therefore, we're led to seek personal inspiration in life's important decisions." This webinar is an opportunity to learn and think about it, but also to think about how you're going to gain guidance in being flexible in your life. Stephanie and Michelle are going to share some of their personal experiences, but the most important insights will come from God to you. So here's our invitation. Grab something to write on, or if you're on the go, imagine pulling out a piece of paper and a pencil. And as you listen, take note of the impressions that come to your mind. That may help you in things that you're struggling with. And then during the coming weeks, pray about what you've written and share your insights with someone who will just listen. Try your thoughts out with that person, and then what other thoughts come. Hopefully this will help you as you learn from what we're doing and from what we say today. Okay, let's begin. Stephanie, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Rixa. Thank you for hosting this webinar. I appreciate being a part of it and of this series, and I appreciate the work you put into women's initiatives at the Marriott School. My story really starts with the women who went before me. Rixa, can you change that slide?
Oh, yep.
Thank you. My great-grandmother, Delpha, lost her mom when she was young and was completely on her own at 14, living in someone else's home as a domestic servant. She was never able to go to college, but she wanted education for her daughters. I'm having trouble changing that, Rixa. Can you change that?
Yeah, let me check. Oh, okay, maybe I'll have to do it. Sorry, we thought we had this all worked out.
My grandma Nita tried to go to college several times. She had to drop out the first time because of money. Her second attempt was after she had 5 kids. She was going to school when her husband suddenly died of a brain aneurysm the day after her youngest turned 6. She was not able to finish her degree until the same year she became a grandmother, about 8 years later. Next slide, please. My mother, Vicki, did attend college and had to drop out with 1 semester left because her husband changed schools and his new school did not have an option for her. She was pregnant with me at the time. She tried to go back to school 3 times. Once after her 3rd child was born, again after she was divorced and a single mom with 6 kids, and finally the same year her youngest started college. This April, she will be graduating from BYU 40 years after she had to drop out. Next slide, please. This is a picture of my mom with my youngest brother attending BYU at the same time, which was really exciting for us, and they will walk together in April. So I grew up watching women who struggled to get their educations because of family obligations and circumstances out of their control, and who also struggled financially while raising children as single mothers because they didn't have the education to get high-paying jobs. I appreciated and I admired their fortitude and their dedication to their families, and I was also scared to death. I was determined to get as much education as fast as I could and to always be career ready so I could support my family in case I needed to suddenly enter the workforce. My plan was to get my bachelor's degree from BYU, go on a mission, get an MBA, and work for a few years before getting married at around age 28 when I would be financially independent and secure. I did get my bachelor's degree at BYU in 3 years. This is a picture of my husband and I. I met him my last semester. We were engaged when I graduated, so I did not serve a mission. But fortunately, I had already applied to the MBA program at BYU because I like to keep my options open. We got married that summer, and I started business school about 2 weeks later. I was 21 and by far the youngest student in the program. I did very well. I was a Haas scholar and heavily recruited, and I also got pregnant by choice in my 2nd year. This is me at my graduation from business school. I was hugely pregnant. My mom says I waddled down the stairs at the Marriott Center, and I had really hard decisions to make. I spent my last semester prayerfully deciding whether to work or stay at home. My husband was also graduating and would be starting a PhD program in biochemistry that would require him to be in the lab for 12 hours a day. The offers I was getting were very good, but would require me to probably work about 60 hours a week. I wasn't sure how I felt about putting my baby into daycare potentially 12 hours a day. On the flip side, graduate school does not pay very well, and the stipends are very small, and I wasn't sure how I felt about turning down very good money to stay at home and be that poor for so long. So it was a very, very hard decision for me to make. I researched. I remember I read a lot of books about mothers who balanced work and career, and I prayed a lot, and I ultimately had a revelatory experience with the scriptures that told me the right thing for me at that time was to stay at home with my baby. And I'm deliberately not sharing what that scripture was because I feel these decisions are so personal, and the answer I got can be different from the answer someone else gets. But my revelation was direct and personal, and I felt that it was the right thing for me at the time. However, I didn't adjust well to being a stay-at-home mom. I was pretty miserable, and I decided to start a PhD in finance at the university closest to me. My plan was to go nights when my husband could be home. We did it for 3 days, and I decided that it was not the right time of life for me. I didn't want to spend the next 5 to 6 years passing the baby at night and never seeing my husband, so I dropped out of the program, and that was embarrassing for me. I had 2 more kids, and when I was pregnant with my 3rd, I was called to be the young men president in my ward. I remember that when I was called, I had the distinct impression to handle my calling professionally because the people in my ward would be the ones giving me my first job. I did that for 2 years, and then we moved, and I had more kids. Rixa, can you change the slide? This is a picture of my family. It's not the most current picture, but it's one of my favorites. And when I was pregnant with my 5th, my daughter, I had the distinct impression that she would be my last child. And after she was born, I felt impressed that it was time to begin to prepare to re-enter the workforce. I didn't know exactly how that would look. And when she was just a couple of months old, I received an email inviting me to dinner with prospective female MBA students at BYU. I don't know why I got that email. I haven't received one like that since, but I got on a plane with my new baby and I went. And both there and online, I met my good friend Michelle, who's on the webinar today, who also feels passionately about women in business topics. Together with Christy Williams, another woman we met virtually who has the same passion and who had the idea. And with Rixa and the Marriott School, we put on the first Women in Business Conference at BYU in 2011, which was a great experience for me. And because of that, I then started the Women in Business group in my local chapter of the BYU Management Society and led that for 2 years. It was while doing that and trying to find speakers that I called up a CEO I knew from my previous ward. He told me he had a position open he thought that I might be interested in. I didn't even call him back for a week because I didn't think it would work. My youngest was 3, and in an odd turn of events, I was homeschooling 2 other kids at that time, and his office was 45 minutes away, and it just didn't feel like the right time. So when I did call him back, fully prepared to tell him thanks but no thanks, he said it was a part-time financial analyst job I could do primarily from home, and it actually paid very well, commensurate with my education, and so I took it because this was the kind of opportunity that I had been waiting 12 years for. And I took it and I made it work. And it has now been 4 years of working in dental practice mergers and acquisitions with dental service organizations, or DSOs, along with some financial management of 2 separate DSOs, each of which has about 7 practices that I've been working. And I've worked from 8 hours a week to 60 hours a week, depending on the client and the work that needed to be done. I'm currently around 10 to 15 hours a week with 2 separate clients, which is right where I want to be at this stage of my parenthood. I have 3 teenagers and 2 younger kids and a busy calling in scouts, and my career is working for me most of the time. It is challenging to juggle it with my family and my church responsibilities. It's not always fun. I'm tired a lot, and I admit that my family has suffered at times, particularly when I'm working really long hours. But for the most part, I am very happy with how things have gone. My plan at this point is to work part-time for another 5 years and then transition to full-time after more of my children have grown up. My ultimate goal is to become a VP of Finance or a CFO, and I am really hoping things work out so that I can achieve it. But one of the things that I have learned as I'm going along is to put my trust in the Lord, and so I'm confident that however my path goes, it will be the right one for me. So thank you.
Okay, and now, Michelle, I guess it's your turn.
I'm going to see if I can click. I can't. Oh, wait. Did I do that?
You did that.
All right. I can click. All right. I'm going to follow Stephanie's lead and talk a little bit about my own family history, the women in my family. My grandma, Emma, my father's mother. The way I describe her life is that she was married to a serial entrepreneur, which meant that they often struggled with finances. She's the mother of 5 amazing children, 2 sons and 3 daughters. Grandma Lucille, my mom's mom, I vividly remember a conversation with her where she talked about how she wanted to be a businesswoman and that was her plan, but she said something like, I guess God had something else in mind. And she felt prompted to marry and have a family, and she was the mother of 6 daughters. We do daughters in our family. And I pulled this picture from a family history, family reunion photo. I just loved the fact that all 6 daughters were there. I want to talk a little bit about that generation. My grandma's girls. So 6 girls on my mom's side, 3 girls on my dad's. And as I was pulling this together, I realized that we have a really interesting distribution at that generation. 4 out of 9 were able to stay at home. 3 out of 9 lost a spouse to death while still raising children. One of those 3 also experienced divorce. So we had 2 who experienced divorce, and one of my aunts never married. She was in a car accident at the age of 19 and has been paralyzed. And she ended up going on and getting a PhD and having a very successful career. But I thought it was so interesting to look at just how unexpected life can be. Just the classic message that we often get as women is that we never know what to expect. My sisters and I have had different experiences so far. I'm the oldest of 4 girls. Again, we do girls really well in our family. I received 2 degrees, both before meeting my husband. I was married at 27. I have 3 children, and as my bio explains, I am involved in nonprofit work. All of my sisters, following the example of my mom, have chosen to stay at home and have been blessed to be able to do that. But all of us have degrees, and all of us have used and are using our educations deliberately, even as we're at home. My sister Tammy married at 19. She has 8 children. She got her 2 undergraduate degrees at the age of 27 with 4 children. She and her husband worked very deliberately for that to happen. And she's heavily involved in civic work. My sister Ginny married at 20, almost 21. She got a degree in math ed. She is the mother of 5 children, including a pair of darling twins. And she has spent a lot of time as a tutor from home, and it also is having some interesting and exciting opportunities in community leadership. My sister Melissa married at 21 with a degree in art education. She also has 5 children, and she has had her own art business and also helps her husband, who is building his dental practice in back east. I just find it's so interesting to look at the patterns in the stories. There are generational differences, obviously, but I'm really proud to be part of a family. My parents just encouraged education. It was just part of our family culture. And without any specific deliberate coaching of any sort, we've all just followed a path that has a mix of motherhood, a passion for education, and a desire to use our skills on the side, if you will. All right, I want to talk a little bit about my plans versus God's plans. This is really the theme of my message today. I was not the type who, what do you want to be when you grow up? I didn't necessarily have a clear professional picture for that, but I did have some passions. First, I wanted to be an ice skater. You can see in this picture that many of you may be too young, but Dorothy Hamill was a famous ice skater in the 70s, and I wanted my hair to look like hers. So for my 12th birthday, my aunts gave me a Dorothy Hamill haircut. And I thought I got a hoot out of the fact that my hair actually looks a lot like my mom's there from that picture. But really, my passion when I was young was basketball. My dad gave me a basketball when I was 3. Again, there was no deliberate kind of gender teaching or anything. My dad was just so supportive of his girls and wanted to give us as many opportunities and open up opportunities for us to experience different things. And I loved basketball. I wanted to play for BYU. This journal of self-discovery I was given when I was a teenager. Most teenage girls spend most of their time thinking about boys. Well, I spent most of my time thinking about basketball. But my high school sophomore year, I had my first personal revelation experience when I was told not to try out for basketball. So then I pursued other things like choir, and had another experience where I was told not to do that. And I won't go through all of these line by line, but the major theme was I would make a decision and then God would tweak it. I would make a decision and then he'd redirect it. And as I pulled this together for this presentation, I sort of chuckled, and I looked at it and I said, there are basically 2 things you can think about my life. Either I got it really wrong all along the way, or God had my back all along the way. And of course, I feel so strongly, and it's so exciting to me to see that absolute pattern that I couldn't go wrong because God was always there helping me refine and redefine when necessary what my plans were. And just to sum up some of that experience of having him take me by the hand. Now, I did a lot of wrestling. This was not like things would just pop out of the blue all the time. I had to wrestle and work for the answers, but he ended up doing things that I couldn't have ever imagined for myself. For example, I rolled that business as an undergrad. So after my mission, when the idea came to get an MBA, it was kind of a shock. But when I was in the MBA program, I had the thought, this is a dream I never knew I had. And to this day, over 20 years later, I still feel like it was one of the best decisions I ever made because it's opened up so many doors for me and just added a richness to my life. I, like Stephanie, couldn't have ever imagined how hard motherhood would be. I made a deliberate decision to stay home as well. But it was just hard. It just wasn't something that clicked with my natural abilities, or so I thought at the moment. I made that choice deliberately in faith because of prophetic counsel and my patriarchal blessing. Without that, I might have chosen a different path. My husband once said to me in my early mothering years, "You're more suited for the boardroom." But I also never could have predicted how much I would end up loving being a mother. I cherish it more than I can say. When I decided to serve a mission, which definitely wasn't in my plan for most of my growing up years and into my young adult years, I never could have known that my mission presence wife would be the one who would help me find my husband. And I never would have guessed recently that the leap of faith job that I took in 2013 would end up morphing into an opportunity that I, again, could never have dreamed for myself. And I will add that often God's plan for me has unfolded over time. I've had to be patient, but I am truly filled with wonder at what He has done and continues to do with my life. I'm just learning that His will is not something to fear. He truly has a big picture view on my life. He can be trusted. I just wanted to add that I didn't go through that list specifically just for time's sake, but I had anticipated being at home full-time until my children all left home. And so when this opportunity to take a part-time job came in 2013, it truly was a leap of faith for me. It wasn't what my plans were. And with 3 busy teenagers, I was really nervous about it. But I have learned to trust those impressions that come. And even though it's a real wrestle, it has been an amazing experience to lean into that tension and to embrace that opportunity that came.
Let's see, Stephanie, I think it's who's got control. Here we go.
Okay, thank you, Rixa. Let me see if I can control this. Yes, I can. Okay. For my remarks, I would like to talk about preparing for a career at any stage. This has sort of been my life work and kind of my passion, is talking to women about how they can keep their skills current regardless of what they're focused on at the time. So I have a few things that I've learned about preparing that I'd like to share. And the first one is know who you are. Do not let your circumstances or the opinion of others define who you are. Sometimes I think that people see what we're doing in the moment and want to make judgments about us based on that. But don't make judgments about yourself based on that. You need to believe in yourself even when no one else does. For example, I view myself as a CEO. I view myself as professional, and so I approach all aspects of my life professionally. And it can be scary to own who you are. I remember that when I went to my first BYU Management Society event, after 12 years out of the workforce, I was scared to death. And so I bought my power suit, and I pumped myself up, and I walked in because I knew who I was inside. And I wanted other people to see that too. The second thing is to focus on gaining skills. Companies want skills. Education and experience are signs that you have skills and are good ways to get skills, but they are not the only way to gain skills. And the skills themselves are what companies are looking for. So focus on the skills themselves. What job do you want? Choose the skills for that job and then find the opportunities to gain them, whether through education, a job, volunteering, or a hobby. For example, this year I volunteered to be the Cub Scout Day Camp Director. Part of it was because no one else would volunteer. They'd asked 40 people and they all said no. And it's my son's last year and I want it to happen. But the other part is that I like the opportunities to lead things. I wanted the experience of heading an organization and developing my leadership skills. And so that's the kind of volunteer work that I do. And so look at your life and think outside the box on how you can gain the skills that you need. The third thing is to handle your callings professionally. I mentioned this earlier in my bio, but But think about who is your network. Often we think, well, my network is the people I know from work or from school, but our networks are really all the people that we come in contact with, and a lot of the people that we come in contact with are the people at church. So handle your callings and your volunteer work as professionally as you would a regular job. Men are good at networking with each other at church to find new jobs. It seems to come organically because they know each other and they interact often, and this leads to job opportunities. In fact, just the other night, I was talking to, I'm the Boy Scout committee chair in my ward, and the Cub Scout committee chair had come to my house because we were working together on some recharter, and I had noticed on LinkedIn that he and I share the same job title. And so I was talking about that, and I said, hey, you know, if you hear of opportunities at your work that you think I might be interested in, you know, let me know. And he said, well, actually, did you know I had changed jobs? Now I'm working with another guy who's our Stake Young Men's president, who I also know well and work with because of my calling. And so, you know, so we're networked, and I think it's important to look at it that way and acknowledge that that the people around you could be the ones that you'll be getting a job through. And so handle your calling very professionally. I want people to think that I'm the best Scout committee chair they've ever seen, and I have a reputation in my stake for perfect recharter paperwork, for following all the rules when I do registrations for things, and I think that's important to me. And I don't know where my next job will come from, so I try to do my best in being professional in everything that I do. The next one is to network professionally. This is what I didn't understand when I was graduating from business school. I knew that my degree was important. I knew that the knowledge I had gained was important, but I didn't have a full appreciation for how important it is to network professionally. So my recommendation would be, if you're not already in a networking group, to do your research to find a networking group that is the best fit for furthering your career and join it. There are a ton out there, and some of them will be a better fit than others. And also be sure that you understand the rules of the group. Some of them have very specific rules. Joining a networking group can be it can be a sacrifice, particularly when you have young children, because often they meet early in the morning or late at night. So it can be challenging to juggle, but it can be a great way to meet others and to lead to opportunities. Also, while you're networking, focus on connecting and helping others. One of the great joys of working on women in business initiatives for me is helping other women and inspiring other women. And when you find your path, reach back and help others along the way. Elder Quentin L. Cook said this in conference a few years ago, and I wish I had put this on my slide, but this is the quote. He said, "I would hope that Latter-day Saints would be at the forefront in creating an environment in the workplace that is more receptive and accommodating to both women and men in their responsibilities as parents." When I heard that, I thought, this is an invitation. This is an invitation to us to make our own workplaces more flexible and to help increase opportunities for other women. My fifth point is to be open to opportunities. Don't rule something out just because you think you can't do it. Oftentimes, when we're presented with opportunities, it might not be the right time, or we may think it's not the right time. We may think it's too hard, we can't fit it in, but always, always consider it. Ask yourself, is it possible? Can I make it work? You know, be prayerful. The answer may be no, but at least consider, because you really never know what you can do. My sixth point is to make your choice and own it. There's a great 7-part series in The Atlantic about ambitious women. It was published around December of this year, and it follows a group of highly ambitious women who attended Northwestern. It's written by one of the women, and 20 years later, only a third are in the kind of executive jobs they all thought they would be. And the author wanted to know what had happened to their ambition, because there's this idea that women start out so ambitious, and 20 years later, you know, they start having kids and they don't want to be CEOs, and so they're wondering, well, do women lose their ambition? And so what she found is that women have not lost their ambition. They are just ambitious in different ways. And I really love this quote that I'm just going to read it. It says, "These women hadn't lost their ambition. Instead, they'd changed the definition of the word. They saw that ambition takes many forms, only one of which is becoming CEO. While everyone may have started out with lofty career goals, many also had lofty personal goals. Ambition doesn't stay in a neatly contained career goals only box. Just as many of our classmates had previously aspired to be the best in their chosen field, They now wanted to be the best mother, the best partner, the best everything else. If you're going to study, study hard. And if you're going to be a mother, be a mother. If you're going to be a lawyer, be the best lawyer you can be, the former Justice Department lawyer told us over Skype in between homeschool lessons and nursing her new baby. If that makes me ambitious, I guess I'm still ambitious. And I totally loved this article, and I love this quote because I felt like it gave me permission to take my foot off the gas a little bit of pushing on my career and focus on what's in front of me at that moment, to give what I'm currently doing in that moment my full energy and the best that I can. So I feel like when you decide to do something, make your choice and own it, and be proud of that choice. And the last point that I wanted to make is to seek constant personal revelation. We are all on different paths. I would never presume to know someone else's path. I am still trying to figure out my own. And some of our paths we get to choose, and some of it is chosen for us through circumstances or the choices of others. But regardless, we can seek revelation on what to do, and we can listen for inspiration. And I believe this is the single most important aspect of planning for flexibility, to have courage in following the Lord's plan for us. One of my favorite stories that I really hope is not just folklore is about a woman with 5 or 6 kids who felt impressed to get her law degree at BYU. And her kids were young, and people questioned her decision because she had so many responsibilities. But she had received a prompting, and she knew she had, and so she enrolled in school. And while she was in school, her husband became ill with cancer, and he died before she graduated. But she graduated with a good job that supported her family, and that would not have been possible if she had not listened to the Spirit and following the prompting. And I love to hear women's stories because we are all on such different and exciting paths. And they're all very personal to us. And I believe that the Lord will guide us on our paths as we seek His help. And that's the message that I hope we leave you with. And I wanted to share this quote from Elder Holland. And the thing that I like about this quote is that he says that revelation almost always comes in response to a question, usually an urgent question. And what I noticed in the questions that were sent in about this webinar is just how heartfelt and how passionate so many of you are in asking for questions and seeking answers. And he says that if you can seek that way and stay in that mode, not much that the adversary can counter with will dissuade you from a righteous path. And so I believe that means that if you're seeking the answers and you're being prayerful, that you don't need to have fear about the path that you choose, that the Lord will help you find the right path, and it will be a good path, even if it seems scary at the time, but that it will be the right thing for your family. And that's what I feel strongly about. Michelle?
I love seeing the patterns that Stephanie and I talked about, how different our stories are in some ways, that she had a plan early on. She followed it. Pretty much every plan I made ended up getting tweaked and changed, and I didn't get my degree until later. She got married before graduation. I didn't get married until I was single and with 2 degrees for living on the other side of the country. But there are also similarities in our messages, and I hope that the patterns will be able to be helpful for you. So I'm going to share some of the principles. I decided to go a little bit less practical and more personal on what has helped me get anchored in my life so that I'm more comfortable with ambiguity and that need to be flexible. I used to be very fearful of the unpredictable nature of life and planning and anticipating. I had this feeling like I had to have a crystal ball and never make mistakes. And of course that's a falsehood, but that was part of my mindset for a long time. So these are some principles that have helped me become more flexible. Rick, so let's see, is there a way to go back? All right. First of all, I like to think about the tensions between general counsel or they're not always tensions, but to have a foundation on general prophetic counsel, but then to realize that I'm going to get personal counsel. For a long time, I think I was a little bit passive. I expected answers to come over the pulpit, and so I would take words over the pulpit and I would wrestle with them and stress about them because I really hadn't owned my own personal process and had confidence in that. So I will follow God's plan the general one, and I will follow his plan for me. And I just put the parenthetical that your plan is none of my business. When I was insecure about my own plan, I spent a lot of time looking sideways, comparing myself to others and wondering what others were thinking about me, and just, again, worried about doing the wrong thing, and trying to look at what others were doing and using that to figure out. And it was a very unsettling place to be. But now, as I really have that confidence that, and again, looking at the pattern of my life and realizing, wow, he's been there all along. I don't need to worry about things being right or wrong. I can know that even though it's messy, and wrestling with God and wrestling through studying things out in your mind is not a clear-cut experience. It's very messy. I can have confidence in this motto that I have to look inward and upward, not sideways. I love this quote from John H. Groberg. Because I've been very anxiety-driven, I've tended toward analysis paralysis, and perhaps some of you can relate to that, where you have a hamster wheel in your head and you just keep going over and over and over and playing the what-if game, and what if this happens, and what if this happens, and really that sets us up for being frozen in our tracks. So I've really learned that if I'm moving my feet, God can guide me. I'm not going to read the whole quote, but I'll go to the third paragraph. He talks about how he's found often in his life that there really could have been different paths that he could have taken, and that's what I've experienced and was told through a father's blessing as I wrestled with what major to choose. Elder Groberg, I don't know if he was Elder Groberg at the time, but he said, because he knows we need the growth, he generally does not point and say, open that door and go 12 yards in that direction, then turn right and go 2 miles. But if it is wrong, he will let us know. We will feel it for sure. I'm positive of that. So rather than saying, I will not move until I have this burning in my heart, let us turn it around and say, I will move unless I feel it is wrong. And if it is wrong, then I will not do it. I love this concept of eliminating wrong choices. He says by eliminating wrong courses, very quickly you'll find, yes, I'm going in the right direction. I'm doing what my Father wants me to do because I'm not doing the things he does not want me to do. And you can know that for sure. This is part of the growth process and part of accomplishing what our Father in heaven has in mind for us. And I found this to be true over and over and over again. I would head in a direction, and then I would either feel a no, or I would feel a tweak, or I would feel a new idea that, like I said before, was nothing I could have ever dreamed for myself. But it was in moving my feet that I was able to that I continue to be able to get guidance. And I, again, have a lot more confidence in that process and a lot less fear about making mistakes, because that's part of the process. Perhaps you know that video from Elder Holland talking about going with his son. They were at a fork in the road. They felt prompted to go one way, and it was a dead end. And his son was very confused by that. And Elder Holland said, maybe God let us go that way so that we would have confidence knowing that this other direction was the right way. Very similar to, there are a lot of similarities with the thoughts that I wanted to share. That there is truly nothing to fear from the journey. Again, I spend a lot of time being afraid. And fear not only paralyzes us, but really hinders our ability to be confident, not just in God, but in ourselves. We have light within ourselves, and we can use that light to the best of our ability, and then trust that God will help guide and tweak. For many years, I said on my plan, God plan slide that I have had many opportunities through the 18 plus years of being a stay-at-home mom to keep my business toe in the puddle and to keep those skills current. And there was a while there where I was really worried that maybe I was doing the wrong thing, again, that anxiety. When I got my job offer in 2013, I had a very clear impression. Impressions don't always come in words, but this one did. And the impression was simple. Wherefore did you doubt? That was a turning point for me as I realized that through all that I had done, God knew my heart, And he took everything that I had done, including the mistakes that I'd made, because when you're trying to wrestle different things in your life and trying to balance them, you will make mistakes. You're going to be focusing on this ball over here as you're juggling. You're going to drop this ball over here. And I had a roommate who said, just be sure you don't always drop the same ball over and over again. But that experience of that impression really turned my heart and helped me realize that I can have confidence in my process, because I am trying to do my best, and God is and has been and will continue to be there for me. I'm struck by the definition of faith, an element of faith as defined in the Bible dictionary, and this comes from Lectures on Faith, that the effects of true faith in Jesus Christ include an actual knowledge that the course of one's life, the controls are in the way of the quote. An actual knowledge that the course of life one is pursuing is acceptable to the Lord. I realize now that I can relax into his care. I wanted to make a note of this, that just because something is hard doesn't mean it is wrong. For me, everybody needs to learn to feel what revelation feels like, but for me, sometimes I've been confused when something is hard. I would shy away and think, oh, maybe this isn't the right thing for me. There's a difference between something being hard and that real stupor of thought where it's really just not working and I'm beating my head against a wall. As I mentioned before, motherhood was the hardest thing that I had done to that point. And if I had made a decision based on the fact that it was just hard, I might have gone on and worked instead of being a mom. And it was in leaning into being a mom that I became a better mom. And God gave me what I desired. And I obviously have things to always work on, but I feel like he helped me become a better mother because I chose to be a mother. I leaned into that hard. This is a little different twist. I've mentioned in my bio that I deal with chronic illness. Very hard. But in my old mindset, I thought it's because I was doing something wrong. Oh, I must be sick because I need to have more faith, or I need to do something. I had this linear mindset that hard things meant I did something wrong. And I realize now that that's not true. Many blessings, in fact, my current job really is a result, if I trace it back, to me struggling with chronic health problems. God has compensated for what used to feel just wrong and unfair. Taking the job I did in 2013 was hard for a couple of reasons. I was insecure and didn't really believe in myself. And I honestly would rather not be working while my kids are at home. My husband makes enough that I have that option to stay home. But that tension is hard of trying to balance my devotion to my kids and wanting to be present for them, especially at this time where they're teenagers, but feeling very strongly prompted that I should be doing this work as well. And again, the hard doesn't mean it's wrong. It's exercising this muscle of faith and trusting God. I have 3 little mottos that come out of that. Mortality is messy. That's from Wendy Ulrich. The truth shall set you free, even if it's hard. And it's all bread. Even when something feels like it's hard or unfair, God will compensate and consecrate that hard for your good. Lastly, Stephanie and I have talked a lot about whether balance is really even a possibility. I see it as more of a myth, so that is why I put the question mark by it. But if there are questions that have come through, many of them, about how to balance life, and my answer is this is how I approach it. I simply try to focus on doing the next right thing. It doesn't mean that I don't have plans for the future, but when it comes right down to it in a practical way, I just focus on the next right thing. I love this quote from Arthur Henry King. One of the mistakes we make over and over again in life is to go directly for the things we think are important. But if we aim at self-fulfillment, we shall never be fulfilled. If we aim at education, we shall never be educated. That doesn't mean that having goals for education won't help you get educated. But hear what he's trying to say. I added, if we aim for balance, we shall never be balanced. If we aim at salvation, we shall never be saved. These things are indirect, supreme results of doing something else. And this something else is service, it is righteousness, and I particularly like this last line. It is trying to do the right thing, the thing that needs to be done at each moment. As we engage God on a day-to-day basis, on an hourly basis, then the balance can show itself. And every day is a little bit different. I have to trust that some days I'm going to need to work on a deadline for work, and other days I'm going to need to put my work aside and just focus on my kids. And every day is usually a mix of those kinds of things. And I never really know quite how that's going to work out until I engage in the present moment to seek for inspiration on what to do. So my question for you, my thought question is, what's your next right thing? Even as you're making plans and are wrestling with questions about what to do in your big picture, what's your next right thing?
This is Rixa. I thank you, Stephanie and Michelle, for going through those and talking about the things you've learned. And as I've listened, I've thought, I was impressed that life doesn't have a right or wrong model, that we are all different and we will have things in different orders. My own timetable says that I was a stay-at-home mom for 20 years. I started school, got married, we moved, we had children, and 20 years later, I had this strong impression, go back to school. I did that, and within 2 months of graduating with a bachelor's, my husband decided to start his own company, and we had long talks about how is this going to work as an entrepreneur, and decided that the best thing might be, for the short term, was our thought, that I would work so that we would have regular money on the table, regular food on the table, and insurance for 6 children, 2 of which were going on missions at that time. And so I started work. But at the same time, I was already enrolled in a master's program, so I continued that. And lo and behold, over 20 years later, I am working and loving it. And it's been a blessing for our family that I would have never chosen. At that time, I didn't know what was ahead for me. But it's been a blessing for myself, for my children, for others. And I think my children all went on to school and got degrees, because at their formative times in their teenage years, when they'd say, oh, I have to study, I immediately said, well, I'm studying too, and I'm doing this too. So, let's all do this together. So we all learn as we go. We wanted to go over some of the questions that you asked, and that maybe weren't talked about specifically, and see if we have any more to add to these things. So let's go through a few of these just quickly. Many of the questions were about fears about how working would affect family. Things like, I'm going back to work after 8 years. I'm not sure how to be there for my kids. I fear the possibility that my desire to work will hurt my marriage. My fear is missing out on my children. I might not be able to support my children in various activities while continuing to work full-time, or not being present with my children enough. Michelle or Stephanie, do you have any comments about this question?
I can jump in. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it will affect your family, both in good ways and bad. There are opportunity costs to everything, but I think the key is to make sure the positive benefits outweigh the negative benefits. And I think, the fact that concern is shows me that it'll be okay. And so I'd say don't be afraid to take risks. Like Michelle, I really liked what Michelle pointed out in her presentation. You step forward, and then if it feels wrong, then you stop at that time and you can scale back.
And I just want to add to that the thought that I shared at the end of doing the next right thing, being really present so that whatever choice you're making, first, you're not making it in fear, you're just making it based on all the facts in the moment. And I also have gotten better about being really deliberate about carving out time. For a long time, as I was trying to work at home, I would try to work while I was with the kids, and I just realized that kind of multitasking really doesn't work for me. And so being deliberate about, okay, when they're home, I do everything I can to be home. And then I use time when they're in bed or at school to do my work, and try to be specific about dividing up that time as much as possible, so that when I'm with them, I am with them and I'm present as much as possible.
Thank you. Good comments. Other questions were about balancing church callings and work and family. As women in the church, we're called to different volunteer positions at different times. If you have a business or job, how do you change things when you're asked to serve in a new calling that requires more of your time? Or I seem to be okay balancing work and home when my calling is light, but when more is asked of me at church, what then? Or not having enough time to complete all the activities and fulfill my call as a seminary teacher. A few people who are concerned about how do we do this? What are your tricks? Stephanie, do you have a trick for trying to balance things in your life?
Well, I think that sometimes we approach callings from a fearful perspective, and especially when we're super busy. I know when I'm really busy and someone asks me to do something more, sometimes it even makes me feel a little angry, to be honest. But I do believe that callings are opportunities, and I think that we don't know the ways our lives and the lives of those we serve will be blessed when we serve. And we also don't know how the Lord will step in to compensate and to make up for what we lack. And so I think that we should seriously consider, and I do find that the Lord does compensate. For example, one blessed year, I've always had administrative callings. Every calling is presidency or administrative, but one blessed year I was the Laurel Advisor, which was my dream calling. And I had a group of girls who were an interesting mix of non-member exchange students and members in different phases of their testimony. And I was working full-time. And I was moving, and I just had so much on my plate. And every week I would come to Saturday night, and I wouldn't have planned a lesson, and I'd pray for guidance. And the lesson was the same every week. It was, these girls need to know that the Lord loves them and that they can go to Him for answers. Every week, no matter what the topic was, that was the bottom line. And I felt like the Lord had put me in that spot at that time, and I was able to fulfill it in a way that I knew how. So I think that often there's that compensation that we don't know what it's going to look like until we get there.
I just want to second witness that. I learned this lesson in a very significant way when I was in college, and I made a deliberate decision to put God first. For me at that time, that meant going to the library after class. And before I did any studying, I was a very, very diligent, almost to a fault student, and time was always a concern, but I decided to put God first and put my scripture study first, and I always was able to get done what I needed to get done, and I excelled, and I really believe that part of the reason I did as well as I did in my schooling is because I made that choice in faith. I have a recent experience with this. When you combine 3 teenagers, a part-time job with a very busy load this year as we're hosting a national summit and chronic health issues, I would tell you that I am maxed out. And then just 2 weeks ago, I was called to be a facilitator in the new Self-Reliance Services program. Requires 2 hours a week for 12 weeks plus prep time and in between meeting ministering time. I do not have time for this calling, and I'm putting, air quotes. I do not have time, but I felt like it was the right thing to do, and I trust what Stephanie just said, that He will make time, and I'm already feeling the blessings that He has for me, and the blessings that can come for the things that matter to me and being able to help other people through this program. I'm just going to put a plug in for it in case we run out of time, that so many questions that came through. Talk to your bishop about the Self-Reliance Services program and getting involved in it, because it is amazing. I think the answer really is that we can trust God to help us make adjustments and be flexible as changes come, as our loads change.
And I might say that my balance is not your balance, that the way I make things happen is not the same as the way someone else may have things happen. So because we're asked to do something as a volunteer doesn't mean we have to do it exactly like the person who did it before us, but we do it because we have our own unique talents and abilities to bring to whatever that service may be. So I think that's also something to think of, that maybe what we have to offer, and as much as we do, is what is needed at that time. Other questions are, well, okay, so we're talking about balancing church and work and family, but what about myself? How do you balance what others expect of you with what you want to do? or finding motivation and time to work or pursue your own hobbies, not getting enough time for me. How do you strive for balance without losing yourself, or getting more time for self? Any comments about that?
I'll start. I think that two thoughts come to mind. One is find your bottom line necessary things. There are certain things that I know I need to do to maintain my spirituality and my sanity and my health. So, for example, I make time to walk. I make time to go to, I'm a 12-stepper. I've done 12 steps to help me with my anxiety, and I just make time to do that weekly. And I think if you do have a lot on your plate, sometimes there are things that I have to let go of too. I probably won't be able to do the choir that I love to do this year because of the heavy workload that I have. And so again, just adjusting to life as it comes, but find your bottom line things and make time for them.
Oh, I like that. I'm a strong believer of Stephen Covey's first things first, that when we decide what is important, is that walking or running, or is there something that I need to do for me that's important, we do that, and then everything else fits in. And I think that helps.
I'm not really good at this. I'm too much of a multitasker. So I run with my friends and I read my scriptures, and that's about all I get done for myself.
Well, and that's something. And again, I think we all have to make that our own balance.
And recognize that it's just messy. There's never a formula that's going to work. Even if you figure something out, something else is going to throw a wrench into it. So just get comfortable with uncertainty and the mess, because it really is. It really is a myth that somehow we're going to be able to keep perfect balance. It never happens.
And it changes, so you go back and forth.
Yeah.
A lot of questions were about staying current while staying home, and I think Stephanie addressed quite a bit of this. Well, both of you really did. Any last words on it? Keeping good relationships with company while working, best ways to stay current, or concerned that they've already shut the door.
Do we have the slide from the Women in Business site?
Yeah, it's forward. We'll come to it in a little while, and we can address it then.
That would be what I'd point people to, is that brainstormed list of ideas of staying home, staying connected.
Okay, we'll be there in a minute. And another one on dealing with stress, maintaining physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual survival. I think the fact that people are asking about that helps them. They know already that they're dealing with that, and so then I think we all look at, okay, what do I need to change? What can't I change? How can I involve my family in my dealing with the stress of what's happening? Sometimes I found when I first worked that I thought because I was working, I better do everything I ever did for my children plus more so they wouldn't miss me. Talk about a mistake. And I soon learned that they need to learn to do their own laundry. And, if they wanted to have friends come over for lunch from high school, then they learned to cook their own meals. And there were just things that we adjusted and changed. And I found that, and it was really dealing with my stress of not being able to, that made that happen. Did you have any ideas on that?
One of the things, the mindset changes that I've had to make is to expect that I'm going to drop some balls. Again, making sure that they're not always the same balls over and over again. But for me, that's more of a spiritual mindset than a practical one. Being able to trust that as I try to do the next right thing, which means that, the next right thing might be something that means I'm dropping another ball, but to trust that if I focus on doing the next right thing, that things will work out. So not trying to there's a saying that if anything, how do we say it? If it's not worth doing if you don't do it well. I prefer the saying that it's not worth doing if you can't do it poorly. Sometimes you're not going to be able to do everything at a level 10 level, and that's okay.
I think I deal with stress and practical matters. I have to exercise, eat healthy, read my scriptures, and sleep. And if I'm doing those 4 things, I generally can roll with a lot of things. And if one of those things is lacking, then I struggle more.
Thank you. I think we've talked about that. And then we're talking about what are some resources to help as we're in transition. And Michelle has already talked about the amazing Self-Reliance services and the kinds of help you can find there. Certainly reach out to your network and other people you know who have gone through similar things as you have to help you and give advice. Another one would be this blog. Michelle, do you want to explain it?
At the Women in Business conference that Stephanie talked about in 2011, we had a panel called Staying Home, Staying Connected. And I only captured the header on this post, but it is a long post. A lot of ideas that were generated by women on the panel about ways to stay home and stay connected. And I think that some of the ideas are very relevant for those who are also working. Ways to stay connected and keep your network and resume active. I think Stephanie and I would both say that we have a deep passion for kind of getting out of that either-or mindset, that either you're a mom or you're working, that there is so much space in the middle. Even if you are full time at home, there are ways to keep that toe in the puddle. And if you're professional, if you're working, there are also ways to keep your saw sharp. And so be creative and deliberate about finding ways to expand your horizons, expand your circle, to be in a continuous learning mode.
Thank you. And then finally, I also found some of the questions about how can I enjoy life when there's so much coming at me and things are changing so quickly. I think one of the important things is for us to find joy in the change and in what's happening in our life at the time. We can't be everything all the time, but some things will change over time. Expect that life won't follow a plan that we begin with, but as Michelle's pointed out and Stephanie, that we can find our own plan and that will change over time as we follow the inspiration and circumstances that happen to us. Accept and ask for help. We all need that, and there are people put in our lives there because they can be an influence and help when we need it. Don't let your fears stop you from finding the joys that you can find in the various parts of your life, and in the joy in trying to balance, and the joy in having a 2-year-old, sometimes there's the challenges we have are also some of our greatest joys, and finding a way to enjoy where you are when you are there. I think that's an important part of this idea of what we're talking about, and planning for flexibility is that you can't just always think about what's ahead, but you also have to find a way to enjoy where you are at the time you're there. Any final comments?
I love those thoughts. And I would just add, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record now, but for me, joy is found in discovering how much God cares about my life, and just letting him be a part of it, and relaxing into his care as he helps things unfold rather than trying to force things to happen. I'm deliberate in my life. I make deliberate choices. I'm moving my feet, but to do so without fear, and to just know that, as President Hinckley said, things will work out.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you, Rixa. This was a great opportunity to reflect on these things, and I appreciate being able to share some of my thoughts.
Well, we appreciate both of you, and I hope that our audience has had a chance to think about their own circumstances, where they are, what the decisions they're making, what they're balancing, what their challenges are, and that this has maybe helped them as they go through their own journey. Thanks to all of your audience for being there. We will send you a short survey immediately after, and we'd appreciate you filling that out. This has been recorded, and we'll post it on the BYU Management Society website under resources. You'll be sent a link to the recording as soon as it's posted. Again, thank you both for your presentation, and thanks to our audience for being on the call. We do hope you'll join us for our next webinar, and I should have done a slide on this. On Thursday, April 20th at 2 p.m. Utah time, Mala Gruel and Caroline Weldy will talk about building business relationships. They jointly own a company that's Talent Catalyst, and I think they've got some great things to help us understand that networking and building relationship in a business professional situations. So a link to the registration is on the Management Society website, and I will send it to you as well. And have a great day, and please enjoy the unexpected in your journey.